She hadn't spoken a single word in 10 years. Not to her family, not to her doctors, not even in her sleep. People thought the trauma had stolen her voice forever. But the day she finally opened her mouth, the single sentence she whispered didn't just break her silence. It shattered the lives of the most powerful people in New York. Because sometimes silence isn't fear. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is evidence. And when the truth finally escapes, it destroys everything built on lies. The Rothschild mansion was the kind of place where silence was expected. Polished marble, spotless chandeliers, and secrets so old they felt carved into the walls. But none of the family secrets were as haunting as 16-year-old Serafina Rothschild, the girl who hadn't spoken a single word in 10 years. Doctors wrote thick files calling it selective mutism. Psychiatrists labeled it deep trauma. Her stepmother called it an embarrassment. But no one, not one person, ever looked closely enough to see the truth hiding behind Serafina's wide, frightened eyes. Until Ezra walked into her world, he was everything the Rothschild household despised. A black kid from the Bronx, hired as her companion, dressed in a borrowed suit 2 sizes too big. The staff snickered when he passed. Her stepmother didn't bother hiding her disgust, but Serafina didn't look away from him. She didn't flinch. She didn't retreat into that icy shell everyone believed she was trapped in. Ezra noticed something the specialists, the therapists, and the wealthy adults never could. Serafina wasn't broken. She was guarding something. Her room was filled with drawings, dozens of them. Not childish sketches, but dark, chilling images. Long shadows stretching across marble floors, blood dripping down banisters, bodies falling from staircases, faceless figures towering over a little girl. Everyone dismissed them as distorted imagination. Ezra didn't. The first time he sat beside her on the cold window ledge, she slid one of the drawings toward him. Her hand trembling, eyes begging him to understand, it wasn't ART, it wasn't fantasy. They were memories. And in that quiet moment, as Ezra met her gaze, something deep inside Serafina, something buried for a decade, began to stir. Her silence wasn't a cage, it was protection. And something, or someone she feared, was still inside that house. The Rothschild mansion had always been a palace of marble, gold, and quiet whispers. But for Ezra, it felt more like a beautifully decorated battlefield. The moment he stepped through its towering doors, he understood the truth. This was not a place built for people like him. Here, money wasn't just wealth, it was a weapon, and it was aimed at him every single day. The staff didn't bother hiding their sneers. The butler avoided touching anything Ezra touched, wiping surfaces as soon as he passed. The cooks whispered behind his back, loud enough for him to hear words like street boy, charity hire, and sometimes, worse, Serafina noticed everything. She sat silently in her corner, her pale fingers curled around her sketchbook, eyes following Ezra with a softness no one else in the mansion ever received. She could feel the cruelty dripping from the walls, thick and suffocating, because she had lived in it far longer than he had. The dinner on the night of the Rothschild fundraising dinner arrived like a storm. Shiny cars pulling up the driveway, diamonds glinting on necks, powerful men shaking hands made of cold steel and colder hearts. Ezra wasn't allowed near the main hall. He was ordered to stand by the side entrance, so the donors don't feel uncomfortable, the event coordinator said with a tight smile. Upstairs, hidden behind the railing of the grand staircase, Serafina watched like a ghost lingering between worlds. Her stepmother had ordered her to stay unseen. "We don't need your quiet little presence scaring off the guests," she hissed. Serafina didn't care. Her eyes stayed locked on Ezra. Down below, a cluster of wealthy elites circled him like hyenas. "Is he the new helper?" one woman whispered, before laughing into her champagne glass. "Looks like they picked him up off the streets." "Primitive," a man added, loud enough for Ezra to hear. "Dangerous," another murmured, as if Ezra were a wild animal let loose among civilized society. A roar built inside Serafina's chest. Her breath shortened, her vision blurred. Her hands shook uncontrollably, because she recognized the feeling, the humiliation, the powerlessness. She had lived it, too, for 10 long, voiceless years. Ezra kept his head down, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't feel the pain, but because he'd been taught his entire life that reacting would only make things worse. Serafina gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. A memory flickered in her mind. Shadows, raised voices, the sound of someone else being mocked, hurt, destroyed. Her heart pounded. Her throat tightened. If she could have spoken in that moment, she would have screamed. The therapy assistant the next morning, Ezra was instructed to sit on. Serafina's mandatory therapy session. Dr. Ellington, a well-paid psychiatrist who treated the Rothschilds' reputation more than their daughter, sat across from Serafina with a cold, clinical smile. "Good morning, Ezra," he said, though his tone made it clear the greeting wasn't sincere. "I hear you've been assisting Serafina." Ezra nodded politely to Ellington's smile sharpened. "It must be quite an adjustment for someone of your background." Ezra paused. "I'm managing Gafina." Ellington hummed. "Street environments do tend to create resilience." Serafina's eyes lifted instantly. Ellington continued, pretending not to notice her reaction. "I assume the Rothschilds hired you because you were affordable. They are very generous, after all." Ezra's jaw tightened. He didn't trust himself to speak. But Serafina, who had sat silent for a decade, began breathing faster. Her fingers twitched against the sketchbook on her lap. Ellington smirked. "Don't worry, Ezra. We will try our best to help you fit into civilized spaces." A loud exhale escaped Serafina. Sharp, emotional, uncontainable. Ezra turned to her. Her face was flushed, her eyes full of anger, sadness, something raw and protective. "Serafina?" Ellington asked, finally noticing. She didn't look at the doctor. She looked at Ezra. For the first time in years, her silence felt loud. Alive, electric. Ezra felt a shock run through him. This wasn't just empathy. This wasn't her reacting to insults thrown at herself. She was reacting to cruelty aimed at him. After the session, they sat together in her room. She didn't draw. She didn't hide. She simply watched him with an expression he had never seen from her before. Recognition, understanding, pain meeting pain. Ezra finally spoke softly, almost whispering, "They treat me like I'm nothing here." Serafina blinked slowly. Her eyes shimmered with something fragile, something that wanted to reach out, even if her voice couldn't. He continued, "But you see it, even when you don't talk." She swallowed, her breath hitching, and then, in a gesture that felt like a world shifting, Serafina reached forward and placed her hand over his. Not shaking, not scared, not fragile, steady. Ezra froze. The connection was unmistakable. Two souls bruised by their environments, both unheard, both unseen. But in each other, they finally saw the truth. Serafina wasn't just silent. She wasn't just traumatized. She wasn't just hiding memories. She was protecting a secret so heavy it had stolen her voice. And now, for the first time in 10 years, someone had touched the edges of that truth. Someone she trusted, someone who cared, someone who made her silence tremble. The storm began with a single, trembling gesture. Serafina reached into the sleeve of her oversized sweater and pulled out a tiny silver key. Cold, rusted at the edges, small enough to disappear in a closed fist. She held it out to Ezra, without blinking, her breath shallow, her eyes weighted with fear and trust all at once. Ezra hesitated. "Is this for me?" Serafina nodded. Her hand shook as she pressed the key into his palm, then pointed toward her closet. The one no maid was allowed to touch, the one her stepmother claimed held nothing but old clothes. Ezra felt a chill travel down his spine to the closet that hid a decade of He opened the closet slowly, expecting. He wasn't sure what. Clothes, maybe. Dust, boxes, forgotten toys. But behind the dresses, tucked behind a false wooden panel, he found a small, locked compartment. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a journal, thick, heavy, its leather edges worn, its pages uneven, stuffed with loose paper. Ezra carried it to the bed and sat beside Serafina. Her breathing was shaky, but her gaze stayed firm, like she needed this moment to finally happen. He opened the first page. He froze. IT wasn't just sketches. That IT wasn't random trauma drawings. That IT was evidence point 10 years of drawings. 10 years of corruption page after page. Ezra saw things no child should have witnessed. No teenager should have held inside. No victim should have carried alone. She had drawn faces, clear, recognizable faces, of politicians, judges, police commissioners, COs, lawyers. Some pages weren't drawings at all but taped photographs, copied documents, numbers and dates written in trembling handwriting. Ezra's voice wavered as he flipped through the journal. Serafina, these aren't memories. These are, he swallowed hard. This is evidence. She closed her eyes, fighting tears. There were sketches of secret meetings in the mansion study, pictures of money changing hands, dates recorded next to every transaction, names of officers who took bribes, lists of case numbers that mysteriously disappeared. Point one page made Ezra's heart stop. The IT showed two men, two fathers, standing together in the mansion's foyer. Serafina had drawn it when she was 6 years old. Point one man was Detective Miguel Rodriguez, Ezra's father. The other was Officer Daniel Wright, Ezra's father's partner, Martinez's mentor. Both men were colored in red ink, Serafina's symbol for danger. Both had the date May 14th scribbled above their heads. The night they were murdered, Ezra's chest tightened. She had witnessed everything. To a 6-year-old child had been the only witness to a double homicide that shook the NYPD, and for 10 years she had been silenced. Ezra shut the journal slowly, fear crawling up his spine. Why didn't anyone know? He whispered. Serafina didn't speak, but she pointed to one name written over and over across dozens of pages. Victoria Rothschild, her stepmother, and beside her name, Vincent Webb, chief of Rothschild Security, former NYPD, suspected of corruption, never convicted. Ezra felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just a family secret. That IT was an organized criminal empire protected by wealth, fear, and silence. The Bernovich couldn't sleep that night. The images from the journal burned through his mind like fire. He waited until the hallway lights dimmed and the mansion fell into its nightly hush before he slipped into Victoria's office. His heart hammered as he rifled through drawers until he found a black box, locked with a combination. He remembered a date he'd seen repeated in the journal. Victoria's wedding anniversary. He typed it. The box clicked open. Inside was a small black burner phone. He scrolled through recent messages. His blood ran cold. Boy has to go. Make it look like gang violence. Ensure no witnesses. This is the last loose thread. The messages were time-stamped from 3 days ago. They were about him. Ezra stuffed the phone into his pocket and ran. It didn't make it far. Two black SUVs pulled up outside the servants' entrance. Men in tactical gear jumped out. No badges, no hesitation. Grab him. Ezra sprinted down the driveway, slipping on gravel. A gunshot cracked behind him, grazing his arm. He ducked behind a stone fountain, his lungs burning, heart pounding like a war drum. Another shot, another yell, another set of footsteps closing in. Just when he thought he'd be dragged away, a spotlight exploded across the driveway. This is the NYPD. Drop your weapons. Squad cars screeched onto the property. Officers swarmed in. The men in black scattered, melting into the shadows. Ezra collapsed to his knees. A tall officer ran toward him, dropping beside him. Ezra? Ezra Rodriguez. Ezra looked up, vision blurry. Detective Martinez. Martinez's face was a storm of emotions. Shock, recognition, grief. You're Miguel's son, Martinez whispered. Ezra nodded weakly. The detective swallowed hard and helped him to his feet. We need to talk. Now. The truth about their FHRS at the station. Martinez closed the blinds and locked the door. I didn't know you were involved, Martinez said. I thought you were just a kid trying to survive in the Bronx. But now, he exhaled shakily. Now I understand. He pulled out an old case file, one Ezra had seen tucked inside the journal. Martinez tapped the photo of 2 smiling officers. Your father and mine were working together, he said. They found something they weren't supposed to find. Something huge. They were planning to expose a corruption network involving politicians, law enforcement, and wealthy private donors. Ezra whispered, "The Rothschilds." Martinez nodded. And the night they were ready to come forward, his voice cracked. They were murdered. Ezra's hands curled into fists. By Victoria and her security chief, Martinez continued. Vincent Webb was the one who pulled the trigger. Victoria ordered the cleanup. They bribed half the department to bury the case. Ezra felt the floor tilt beneath him. My father died because he tried to do what's right. So did mine, Martinez said quietly. Ezra shook his head. Why didn't anyone investigate? Martinez's eyes glimmered with old pain. I tried, kid, but I was shut down, threatened. I was 1 year from retirement with a sick wife and 2 kids. I didn't have enough power. But your father, he always said someone would finish what they started. Ezra's voice cracked. Serafina. Martinez frowned. The silent girl? Ezra wiped his eyes. She saw everything. She documented everything. And now they want us both dead. Martinez stared in disbelief. You mean that journal is a 10-year record of corruption? Ezra finished. Drawings, dates, faces, everything. Martinez exhaled slowly. That means you two are the biggest threats to the most powerful people in the city. Ezra nodded. And now both of us are targets. The realization that changes you back at the mansion. Serafina sat by the window, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the driveway where Ezra had almost died. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She knew what the darkness wanted. She knew the danger closing in, and she knew one more thing. The most terrifying truth of all. Her silence had protected her for 10 years, but now that Ezra knew the truth, her silence could get him killed. For the first time in a decade, Serafina felt something powerful, rising in her throat. Not fear, not panic, but a voice that wanted to speak. Because the boy who saw her was now the boy she needed to save, and the world was about to learn what happens when silence finally breaks. The storm arrived without warning. Serafina had been sitting on the floor of her room, her knees pressed to her chest, staring at the driveway where Ezra had nearly been killed. The house was too quiet, too controlled. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but predatory. Then the door burst open. Victoria Rothschild stepped inside like a queen entering a throne room she believed she owned. Her heels clacked sharply against the marble, her cold eyes sweeping the room with disdain. Behind her stood Vincent Webb, his massive frame blocking the doorway. And behind him, 2 armed guards in full tactical gear. Serafina's breath froze. Victoria didn't waste time. Where is it? She hissed. Serafina didn't respond, but her fingers curled involuntarily toward the closet where the journal had been hidden. Victoria saw. Her lips twisted. Oh, sweetheart. You thought you were safe? You thought that boy, she spat the word like poison, could protect you? Serafina's heart hammered so loud she could barely hear. Webb stepped closer, his boots heavy on the carpet. We found what he stole, Victoria said. And now we'll make sure no one believes a word he says. She pulled out a folder. Thick, labeled, too clean, forged. Victoria threw it onto the floor in front of Serafina. See for yourself. Ezra's father wasn't a hero. He was corrupt, dirty, a traitor to the city. Just like Ezra. Serafina stared at the folder, tears burning behind her eyes. Lies, all lies. Victoria continued, voice rising with cruelty. Your father tried to expose Miguel Rodriguez, the real criminal. We killed him because he was going to destroy our entire operation. And Ezra's father? He was in on everything. Webb smirked darkly, folding his arms. For 10 years, Serafina had listened to lies. For 10 years, she had obeyed. For 10 years, she had swallowed every scream, every truth, every memory. But this broke something. Her hand trembled as she reached behind her pillow, pulling out the real journal. The one with 10 years of drawings, memories, dates, and the night she watched her father die. She held it to her chest like a shield that Victoria's face drained. Serafina stood up, slowly, shakily, like a child learning to stand for the first time. Webb moved toward her. Take it from her. And then something miraculous happened. A breath left Serafina's throat, shaky, raw, fragile. Her lips parted, and a whisper escaped. The first word she had spoken in 10 years. Danger. Victoria froze. Webb froze. Even the guards exchanged looks. Serafina felt her vocal cords vibrate painfully, like someone dragging a blade across unused strings. But she forced another breath. In another, Ezra's face flashed in her mind. His pain, his courage, his near death, his truth. Her body began to shake as her voice pushed against 10 years of trauma. She looked straight at Victoria, straight into the eyes of the woman who stole her childhood. And she said, louder, "You lied." Victoria's jaw clenched. "Serafina, stop this." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "Kill my father." The guard shifted uneasily. Victoria took a step forward. "You don't know what you're saying." Serafina clutched the journal tighter. "I drew everything. I saw everything." Her voice rose, turning from shaky to sharp. "You killed my father and Ezra's." Victoria's mask shattered. "Webb." Her voice turned demonic. "Kill them both." The camera she was never supposed to Serafina's body moved on instinct. Not toward the door, not toward the closet, not toward the window, but toward the tiny security camera in the top corner of her room, one Victoria insisted was there for her safety. Serafina knew better. For 10 years, she had lived under surveillance. Now she would use it. She walked directly into its view. Webb lunged forward, but Victoria raised a hand. Not because she cared, but because she didn't think a traumatized, mute girl could possibly matter. Serafina stared into the camera, tears streaking her cheeks, voice trembling but growing stronger with every syllable. "My name is Serafina Rothschild." Victoria's eyes widened. "And I am about to be murdered by my stepmother and her security chief." "Stop her!" Victoria shrieked. Webb rushed forward. Serafina stepped back, holding up the journal like a cross against a demon. "Just like they murdered my father." "Get her!" Victoria screamed, panic cracking her perfect voice. "And Ezra's father too," Serafina finished. Those words were fire, electric, unstoppable. She had spoken them into a camera connected to the mansion's security system, a system backed up to cloud servers, a system viewed by dozens of household staff, a system Victoria could not erase fast enough. Her voice echoed through every monitor in the estate, through every security backup, through every cloud feed, through every device Webb tried to shut down. Serafina had detonated a truth bomb that couldn't be contained. Victoria's scream shattered the air. Webb grabbed Serafina by the arm, yanking her forward. But she didn't go quietly. She screamed, her first real scream in 10 years. The house, as the guards rushed in, made staff peek from the hallway, whispering. Security monitors lit up across the estate. Victoria's voice thundered through the halls. "Turn it off. Cut every feed. Now." But it was too late. Serafina's voice had already been heard by more people in 30 seconds than her Victoria in her entire lifetime. Downstairs, staff scrambled. .1 maid ran outside to call the police. Another hit a panic alarm. "Someone texted Ezra," she spoke. "They're trying to kill her." And as chaos erupted through the mansion, Serafina stared straight into Webb's eyes with a defiance he did not expect. 10 years silent. But now, she was louder than every lie ever told in that house. Victoria's rage. Victoria slapped Serafina hard enough to send her crashing into the wall. "You stupid little brat," she hissed. "You think anyone will believe you? You think anyone cares what you say now? You're nothing." Serafina wiped the blood from her lip. Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. "You're afraid of me now?" Victoria froze like she'd been stabbed. Webb tightened his grip on his gun. And Serafina realized something that changed everything. For the first time in her life, Victoria wasn't the powerful one that Serafina was. Her voice was, her truth was Ezra's life, the one they tried to steal. Now had a witness who had finally learned how to speak. In the halls below, Martinez burst through the front doors with a team of officers. He had seen the camera feed. The entire NYPD had. Ezra ran beside him, blood-soaked bandage wrapped around his arm, breath ragged. "Where is SHE?" he shouted. "Top floor," a maid cried. "They're going to kill her." Ezra sprinted up the stairs. Martinez behind him. He could hear yelling. He could hear crashing. He could hear Serafina's voice. Raw, terrified, newly reborn. The final moment of Part 4, Victoria grabbed Serafina by the hair, pulling her toward the window. "If I go down," she snarled, "I'm dragging you with me." Webb raised his gun. Ezra reached the door. "No," he screamed. Serafina looked at him. Really looked, and for the first time ever, her voice didn't sound like a whisper. It sounded like bravery. "It's okay, Ezra," she said. Ezra froze in shock. Her voice, full, trembling, real, hit him like a miracle. Victoria spun, furious. "You think you've won, little girl? You think anyone will believe you?" Serafina took a breath, a calm, steady breath. "They already heard me." Martinez kicked the door in. Officers stormed the room. Webb grabbed his gun. Victoria lunged. Ezra tackled her. Serafina fell to her knees and whispered one final sentence that would change the entire story. "The truth is out." And it was. Her silence was gone. Her voice was war. And Victoria Rothschild had finally met something more powerful than wealth, fear, and violence. A girl who learned to speak. The mansion shook as sirens closed in from every direction. Red and blue lights flashed across the marble pillars, slicing through the darkness like justice finally breaking through a 10-year storm. FBI. Everyone down. Agents flooded the halls. Boots pounded up the stairs. The empire Victoria built on threats, bribes, and blood was collapsing. Fast, but the queen of this twisted kingdom wasn't surrendering. Not yet. The balcony Billionaire crashed through the glass doors onto the balcony just as Webb lunged for him. The big man moved like a charging bull. Heavy, brutal, unstoppable. Ezra dodged one blow, blocked another, but Webb's fist connected with his ribs. Pain exploded through Ezra's body. He stumbled, grasping the railing to keep from falling over the edge. "You should have stayed in the Bronx, kid," Webb snarled. "You were never meant to live this long." Ezra spat blood and forced a smile. "Funny. That's what your boss said, too." Webb roared and grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Ezra clawed at his arm, gasping, until a voice cut through the chaos. "Let him go." Webb turned. Serafina stood in the doorway, bruised, shaking, but no longer silent. Her voice was steady, strong, alive, and she wasn't alone. Half a dozen FBI agents stood behind her, cameras rolling. Victoria's last before Webb could react. Victoria burst from the bedroom, wild hair flying, mascara streaked from tears and rage. In her hand, a gleaming silver blade. She grabbed Serafina from behind, pressing the blade to her throat. "Back away!" Victoria screamed. "Or she dies." Agents raised their guns. Ezra froze, breath shaking. Serafina did not. For the first time, she wasn't terrified. She wasn't trembling. She was ready. She lifted her chin slightly, eyes locked forward, and she began to speak, the voice that broke an empire. Her offshore account, Serafina said calmly, is registered under V. Roth Investments in the Cayman Islands. Victoria stiffened. Serafina continued, unfaltering. On March 12th, she moved $12 million stolen from the New York Children's Literacy Fund into that account. Agents exchanged shocked glances. Serafina kept going. Names, dates, locations, money trails, photos she'd drawn, patterns she'd watched. Judge Hawthorne took bribes here. Commissioner Briggs covered up Webb's shootings. Senator Langley sold police evidence for cash in this room. Her voice grew louder with every revelation. Ezra stared, mesmerized. She wasn't just confessing. She was unraveling the entire corruption network in real time. Victoria's grip trembled. "You," she stuttered. "You stupid little." Serafina didn't stop. "You killed my father because he found the same evidence. You killed Ezra's father because he refused to stay quiet. And now you're going to prison for the rest of your life." Every word was recorded by 3 FBI body cams. Every word was lethal. The fall of Victoria, and W.E.B. Victoria screamed and pushed the blade harder. But Webb shouted, "Don't." He knew they were finished. That split second of hesitation was all the agents needed. The flash, a shot fired into the air. Agents swarmed Victoria, tackling her to ground, ripping the knife from her hand. Webb lunged towards Serafina, but Ezra slammed into him with every ounce of strength he had left. Together, Agents wrestled Webb to the floor and snapped metal cuffs onto his wrists. Victoria shrieked as she was dragged out. "You ungrateful little rat. I made you." Serafina stood tall, voice steady. "No. You tried to break me." Webb glared at Ezra as he was hauled away. "You think this is over, kid?" Ezra smirked. "It is for you." Justice at last be sunrise. The news had spread nationwide. 47 corrupt officials arrested. Millions in stolen charity funds recovered. A decade-long corruption ring exposed by a silent girl and a boy from the Bronx. Detective Martinez hugged Ezra tight. "Your father would be proud," he whispered. Reporters surrounded Serafina, but she didn't hide. She didn't tremble. She didn't go silent. She held the journal in her hands and said clearly, "My voice was taken from me for 10 years, that I'm never losing it again." Ezra stepped beside her, and together they watched the empire of lies crumble. Justice, after 10 long, painful years, had finally arrived. Serafina's voice didn't just expose corruption. It awakened a nation. For 10 years, she said nothing. But when she finally spoke, her truth toppled the powerful, freed the innocent, and rewrote the future for millions of unheard victims. Ezra healed too. His father's name was cleared. He received a full scholarship to study criminal psychology. And every week, he visits Serafina, not as a companion, but as the friend who helped her find her voice again. Serafina now uses her testimony to advocate for silent survivors. Schools, shelters, and charities invite her to speak. Her first public words became a message the world will never forget. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is a warning. And when the truth finally speaks, listen. The mansion that once hid crimes is now a refuge for children facing trauma, named in memory of the fathers they lost. And the story of the girl who never spoke became the story that inspired millions to finally open their own voices.